Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the uprising in Syria, and we're fortunate to have with us to talk about the uprising in Syria, Dr. LMadu. And I would imagine that Dr. LMadu is familiar to most members of our audience. He has been with us on a number of occasions, and we often refer to him as our Middle East and Africa expert because he has such extraordinary information in reference to the Middle East, Africa, South America. In general, Dr. LMadu, let me simply say so that our audience will also understand, and they know this, that you bring us tremendous information in reference to some of these great problems in a real sense. And today I think one of the problems that the world is concerned about is what in the world is going on in Syria. And you're going to talk about that and do that the way that you think best for our audience this morning, Dr. LMadu.
Well, of course, most people, I would say most, don't know exactly where Syria is, because even in the Middle East, Syria, it's not a country that people understand. You hear more of Iraq, Iran, Lebanon than Syria. Actually, Syria gained independence in 1946. This is a country that's about 72,000 square miles, not a large country in area of land, with a population of about 22 million, 22 million people in Syria. Geopolitically, Syria is in the Middle East. Geographically, it's where you call the Asia Minor, close to the Iranian border. Syria is, surrounded by about 4 or 5 countries. On one side, you have Iran, you have Jordan, you have Lebanon, you have Turkey, and you have Israel. And that's why what is happening in Syria has a big implication for stability in that part of the world. Now, ethnically, 90% or so of the population of Syria are Arabs. Then you have about 9% Kurds. Then the remaining 1% you have Assyrians, Turkmens, and Circassians. Religiously, you have 4 or so major, religious sects there. About 74% is Sunni Muslims. About 12% is Alawites. Alawites are an offshoot of the Shiite religion that's predominant in Iran and in Lebanon and also in Iraq. Then you have about 10% Christians, and then you have about 3%, others. Now, what is happening, with the problem now is the majority rising up against the minority. Prior to 1966, I say prior to, 1966 was when some group of Air Force officers who belonged to the Ba'ath Party, including the father of the current president, Hafez Assad, overthrew the government, and established a Ba'ath Party, government. In 1971, Assad, took over himself, proclaimed himself president of Syria. Now, Assad comes from an a religious minority called the Alawites. The Alawites are an offshoot of the Shiite religion. And the Shiite religion is predominant in Iran. 98% of, Iran is Shiite. They're also about almost half of the population in Lebanon now, even though they don't want to agree to that. And also you have all of them, part of them in Turkey also. And of course in Iraq, those ruling Iraq now are Shiites. Before it was Sunnis under Saddam. So you can see how all this relates. Now when Assad came to power, Hafez Assad, the father of the current president, being a minority Alawite, and that's the first time Alawites have ever taken power. Well, the first thing is to consolidate, knowing that he belongs to a minority group. He has some Sunni, strong Sunni politicians and military officers, behind him. One of those was General Mustafa Atlas, who was the longest serving defense minister after Raul Castro in Cuba. And then there was a man called Abdul Halim Haddam, who was also a strong Sunni politician, also backed Hafez Assad. So with these two strong politicians who are Sunni and others, Assad was able to carry, the Sunni majority in his regime until he died in 2000. In steps his son.
Okay, Dr. LMadu, let's stop at this particular point and for our first commercial break, and then we'll pick up at that point when we come back, because I think the information that you're giving is really intriguing. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to this second segment of the show for today. The topic is the uprising in Syria, and the guest is Dr. LMadu, who has given us some extraordinary information in reference to the ethnic makeup of Syria and a situation that really makes it almost impossible for the current Syria president to really do anything in terms of his own administration. Of course, Dr. LMadu, let's pick up where you left off in terms of how this all happened.
Before we went on break, I mentioned, General Mustafa Atlas and Abdul Halim Haddam, two strong Sunni, politicians. Hafez Assad was able to co-opt, the Sunni political and military class, to support his regime. And that's why he lasted so long. He was very skillful in manipulating these situations. Knowing that he came from a minority sect called the Alawites, who are regarded as a heretic part of Islam, he couldn't win any popular election with majority of the Sunnis, 74% of the population. So what else to do is to impose a dictatorship. Now, the Ba'ath Party was ruling, still rules Syria. It was ruling Iraq when Saddam was there. And mind you that the Ba'ath Party is what you call it's an Arab socialist party. That Ba'ath Party was formed by a Christian, a Syrian Christian called Michel Aflaq. When Saddam was overthrown, there was no more, Ba'ath Party leadership. In Iraq, it's still in Syria up to today. That was one of the problems between Saddam Hussein and President Assad, when he was in power, who controls the Ba'ath Party. Yeah, both of them said, oh, Damascus, that's where it is. Saddam said, no, it's in Baghdad. So he continued to create a very big problem. And one can see that even during the Iran-Iraq war, Syria is an Arab country next door to Iraq. But Hafez Assad supported Iran throughout that war. A, because of his loathing of Saddam, and two, because the Alawites are related to the Shiites who run Iran. Okay? You can also see the connection between Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iraq and Syria. Hezbollah is a Shiite organization. Okay? So Assad is a Alawite, which is Shiite, and the Iranians are Shiites. So they are funneling guns and arms to Hezbollah. You can see the connection. Okay? Having said that, why is all this happening now? One can say, oh, it was spontaneous. It's not spontaneous. Now let's go back, fast forward. In 1982, a group of Sunni fundamentalist, Muslims rose up in rebellion against President Assad in the city of Hama. Assad sent in, his soldiers led by his brother, Rifat al-Assad, General Rifat al-Assad, to go in and take care of the business. Rifat al-Assad went in there and slaughtered over 10,000 people in Hama, flattened the whole city. Up to today, it's used as an example of man's inhumanity to man. Syria also claims that Lebanon belongs to it. Syria is the only country in the world that doesn't recognize Lebanon as a country. Okay, and Hafez Assad, the father of the current president, has been linked to a whole lot of assassinations in Lebanon because they oppose his policies. So Syria has been seen as a terrorist state for long. Hafez Assad was, held responsible for the assassination of Kamal Jumblat. Jumblat was the leader of the Druze sect in Lebanon who opposed him when they were fighting against the PLO in 1975, the Lebanese Civil War. He was held responsible for the assassination of Bashar Gemayel, who was the commander of the Lebanese forces, after he was elected president of Lebanon, because he feared that Gemayel was close to Israel and be used against Syria if he stays as president. He was assassinated about 3 days or a week after he became president. He was also held responsible for the assassination of René Mouawad, who was elected president of Lebanon because he wanted to be independent of Assad. Recently, you've heard of the assassination of Rafik Hariri, which occurred under the Bashar Assad, his son. Hariri, as you know, is a billionaire, Lebanese prime minister, who was opposed to Syria's hegemony in Lebanon. Then he was blown up, The UN is still investigating that case. It was linked back to Bashar al-Assad. So the Assads do their business quietly so that nobody traces it back to them. Unlike Saddam, like we said here before, the Assads are polished and sophisticated killers. Saddam's like a street killer, you know what I mean? Okay. Now, having said that, what is implication for the region of what's happening in Syria? Very important. Israel first. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, the Israeli forces captured the Golan Heights. Golan Heights belongs to Syria, and the biggest city in the Golan Heights is called Kenitra. Israel took it over and refused to give it back to Syria up to today. The Syrians want the Golan Heights back with Kenitra. Israel says, no, unless we have a comprehensive peace with you, like we had with Egypt. Syria says, no, when you return it, then we'll start talking. Now, in 1981, Israel annexed the Golan Heights as part of Israel. Now, what is the implications? To the Israelis, they will probably rather have the Assads in power because of what they know. They know that Assad is not going to allow terrorists or, people against Israel or the Palestinians to launch attacks from Syria on Israeli territory. That has been so. Hafez Assad maintained that stability on the border with Israel. Bashar Assad is still continuing with that policy. So in a way, Israel might be, hoping he stays in power. Very good. Exactly, because of what they know. They are not sure if somebody comes in, you have a fundamentalist Islamic government like they're trying to do in Egypt now. That will be a threat to Israel. So that's very important. Now, Jordan doesn't have any problem with Syria. Now, Saudi Arabia and other countries are asking King Abdullah of Jordan to make Jordan, available for them to ship arms to the Syrian National Council, the rebels. Now, King Abdullah doesn't want to get involved in that because he knows that Assad might start helping the Palestinians. Don't forget that half or three-quarters of Jordan is Palestinian. Assad might still helping them to start rebelling against King Abdullah. They've done that before in the 1970s. That's how Black September came about. The Palestinians wanted to take the whole of Jordan for themselves because they believe Jordan is supposed to be a Palestinian country.
Okay, so, Dr. Mood, let's stop. This is just extraordinary, but we're going to have to stop for the second commercial break, after which time we'll have 10 minutes to continue this. But it seems that all of this intrigue makes it almost impossible, and especially when you talk about the relationship between Israel and Syria and why it might be to its advantage for something to continue. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.